Lead a healthier life. This is Kara's Cures.
Welcome to the CURES show and podcast. I'm Kara Sundlin. This is where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. And certainly sleep betters all of those. So if you're a parent, there's a good chance you spend a lot of time thinking about the sleeping habits of your kids, your little kids. Maybe when are they going to bed? Your adolescents, how come they're not sleeping enough? But did you know there are actually really common mistakes we could all be making that set us up for failure at home? And psychology and sleep are so intertwined that I've asked child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living in Hartford to be here so we can really understand, because it's not just about being tired, right? Thanks for being here, doctor.
Yes, thank you for having me, Kara.
So we just went through a daylight savings time, which I feel like messed everyone up, especially in the newsroom, those with little kids. And I remember that it's like an assault. I mean, the kids can't go to sleep with even 1 hour of change.
Yeah, I mean, remember, spring is where we spring ahead. And so, yes, I mean, now it's lighter a little bit earlier, and it stays lighter longer. Wait, no, it's lighter, a little dark, a little later.
Yes. Yeah.
But yes, that's the hour. Just it can wreak havoc with some people, even 1 hour. And it's really important to understand the foundational nature of sleep, right? You and I say all the time, the two low-hanging fruit, if you're struggling in some area of your life, the two low-hanging fruit to address first are nutrition and sleep. Those are the areas to go after if you want to do something to improve your mood or help yourself feel better.
You know, it's interesting because in prep for this interview, I was Googling, like, why do we sleep and what actually happens to the brain? And it actually said that scientists aren't exactly clear what happens, but that we know it's so necessary and so entwined with our mental health.
It is so necessary, so entwined with our mental health. But it's also important to realize some things about sleep, right? So that there's different stages to sleep. Everyone knows about REM, right? Rapid eye movement, that's often where we're dreaming. And dreaming is such a powerful tool. I mean, I love when I'm working with clients or families, I love to hear about their dreams because they're so indicative of how you feel. And one of the things we're going to talk about in this is anxiety. And actually, one of the things that has a huge influence on your dreams is the thoughts that you're having, the thoughts that you're thinking about right before you sleep. That has a huge impact on dreams. But really understanding the restorative nature that we need phases of deep sleep, we need phases of light sleep, that there actually are. It's typical that people wake up at night and then they just need to just stay in bed and allow themselves to fall back asleep. Sometimes people think if they wake up, that's disrupted sleep. That's actually part of sleep. And that it can actually take up to 30 minutes to fall asleep. Falling asleep and sleep behavior is not a switch that you flip. It is a series of behaviors that lead you into more restful sleep.
I certainly know that as I've gotten older, I can't just go get in bed and fall asleep. Annoyingly, my husband can. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But
we all know those people that fall asleep like this.
Yeah, clear conscience, out like a light. So I have a routine. I need to drink my tea. I need to wind down. I know if I had a really stimulating day, it can be a lot harder for me to fall asleep. But let's just start with the kids. You said right about now, you want parents to understand we might be making really two common mistakes that always affect our kids' sleep. And number one, let's talk about children who are wanting you to rub their back and do all that. We might be staying with them until they fall asleep, and that's a no-no?
Right. So the two common mistakes that parents make that negatively affect their child's sleep is staying with their child until they're completely asleep and granting all of those requests. Can you rub my back? Can you get me some water? Can you fix my blankets? Can you get my stuffed animal? Can you fix the nightlight? Can you adjust all of those requests, which are often either a stall tactic because they really don't want to go to sleep, or they're a sign of anxiety, like they're afraid to be in that kind of self-soothing space. And that's really one of the critical things that period of time between awake and asleep helps us with, is that how we manage our thoughts and feelings that come up during that time, and how you learn to soothe yourself or talk yourself through those periods of time so that you can allow yourself to fall asleep.
You know, there's such a movement in parenting now about nurturing and gentle parenting and doing it differently than our parents did. So when it comes to sleep, I think people feel badly like, oh, I need to really show how, especially if it's a working mom, I need to show how nurturing I am. I'm rubbing their back. This is my time with them. But you're here to say we might want to reframe this and say, just like we teach our kids math later on, we're teaching them an important life skill, which is how to sleep without us.
Right. And I'm not saying that I mean, part of a sleep routine, especially for younger children, the parents are actively involved in that sleep routine, right?
Sure.
You know, when your child's really young, I used to call it, you know, bath bottle bed, right? Now people insert book in there, right? As your child gets a little older, you insert book. So there does need to be routines to sleep. So I'm not saying parents can have to, you know, essentially put their child in a dark room, lock the door, and then, you know, leave the house essentially because they don't want to hear the crying and screaming. There's things that you can do to ease your child into sleep, but it's about creating good habits and keeping a set routine. So the more you create the routine, the more it tells the body and the mind, okay, this is how I'm settling myself. And you know, they can get a little back rub. I'm not saying you can't do that, but it's trying to move away from being the sole source of comfort for them to fall asleep, so that you're there until the time they fall asleep. So you might do a little back rub. You certainly might read a book, and then you set, you know, they can have a little time with a nightlight, and then you can exit so they can have some downtime on their own to read or play with even a quiet little toy in bed, to do something that's self-soothing, but that you're not the one. So it's you know, you want them to learn some independent skills around self-soothing instead of having them be dependent, like I need to rub your back until you're asleep. So it's looking at the difference between the kind of what's dependent on me and what's more independent on me as a parent.
And I love that you're saying that we're teaching. I think that makes me feel better. I learned from a sleep expert when my second child was not the best sleeper, and I was told, leave the room. Crying isn't always distress. Sometimes it's just communication, and set in a 7-minute timer. And if they're still crying, then you can go back in. But like a lot of times, I would find at like minute 2.5, it would completely go away, and my son would be asleep. And it can feel like the longest time ever. But if we think about that, we are teaching our kids how to self-soothe. That's where sleep and psychology really intertwine. We all need to learn how to soothe ourselves, right?
Right. And there actually are, I'm not a sleep specialist. There are sleep specialists out there. I know Connecticut Children's has a really good sleep specialist, Linnell Schneeberg. There are really good sleep specialists out there, but a lot of and that's when it's become a much more prolonged or chronic problem. But a lot of things you can do, it's a stepwise progression, right? They're learning skills, and really it is a lot of times it's about the parent assuaging their own guilt, right? I have guilt because I've worked all day and now I want to spend extra time with them. So, you know, the reason that more and more kids have sleep difficulties is, we don't keep as consistent a schedule. Sometimes it has to do with not enough physical activity. And sometimes it has to do with anxiety. And sometimes that anxiety is the parent's anxiety that they sort of project onto the world or project onto their children. And so, then, well, I have to be there because that's the time that my child shares all their worries from the day. And you know what? It is important for them to share their worries, but it's moving that so it's not right before they go to sleep. It might be a half hour before bedtime or an hour before bedtime or even dinner time. That's their time to share all their worries from the day or all the things that happened to them, from the day, that you can reframe it in different ways. So you don't really want to be thinking about reviewing all those worries right before sleep, because that will affect the quality and nature of your sleep.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, the same way as adults, we're told, don't do your bills in your room. Don't do anything except really sleep. Avoid those scary shows, in the bedroom. So if we're thinking about, we'll do little kids, and then I want our audience to know we're going to move up to adolescents, because that's a whole different issue where they want to kick you out of the room, but you worry about why they're not sleeping once you leave. But for little kids, it can be more difficult also if there's some research that if a child has ADHD, they might be a worse sleeper, or if they have certain mental health conditions. What's your advice for that?
Right. So it is true. So kids that have an attentional disorder, I mean, they are the ones that absolutely need more physical activity, more exposure to daylight, more time outside, right? They need to do those things that really burn their energy, make them physically and mentally more tired. They are also the ones that would be more stimulated by like video games and electronics. That will make it harder for them to sleep. So yes, there are an anxiety. Obviously, if you have a child that's prone to anxiety or already has either a vulnerability or underlying anxiety disorder, there are strategies, particular strategies that you would want to use to move, as I said, sharing some of those anxious thoughts and worries, moving them to an earlier period of time so that they're not plaguing you right before sleep. Because there's really two sort of difficulties. One's called difficulty falling asleep, and the other's early morning awakening. I think that actually happens more with adults when you wake up at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then you review all your worries, that all the things that you didn't complete or all the things that you need to do. That doesn't affect young children as much, that early morning awakening. But as I said, it is natural. It is part of sleep that you might wake up, have to go to the bathroom, but allow yourself to fall back asleep again.
Okay. From a psychological perspective, a lot of times we try to avoid, no, the child can never sleep in our bed or they'll never get out of it. But I just want to know from your perspective, on your side of the couch, is co-sleeping or sometimes allowing your child to be in your bed okay, or is it a never?
So there's a lot of controversy around this topic. And generally I go a middle of the road route. And, if your child's sick, and you allow them to sleep in your bed, it's not going to be the end of the world. What you don't want is to set up chronic or repeated patterns. So if your child's sleeping in your bed every single night, then that means that they're dependent on you or dependent on that space in order to fall asleep. I think it's more concerning with young, like infants, right? They're concerned about different things with infants and co-sleeping.
Sure.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, we got to be safe so we don't roll over on our baby. But sometimes it's they keep coming in your room. Yeah. Right.
And some of that is they need to learn that that it's natural. It's a part of sleep to wake up in the middle of the night, to be awake, and then to just let yourself fall back asleep again. So that's part of sleeping. It's not a sign that there's a disruption in sleep, or it's not a sign that you're awake for the day if they wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Part of sleeping is sometimes waking up, repositioning yourself. I worked with someone one time who used to say, waking up means that you go to the bathroom, take a sip of water, and go back to sleep. And that's how you write yourself back to sleep. So whatever, and you can create a routine knowing your child based on how old they are. They might wake up, they might go to the bathroom, take a little sip of water, and then go back into their bed. And it might take them a few minutes to fall asleep again, but they're in there and they're going to quiet their mind and their body.
So as we move into adolescence, technology becomes a bigger issue. And there's a lot of controversy about that too, about never ever let the phones or the devices in the room. And I say that because there are also kids who say, I'm going to be super responsible about this, but I just like to read on my phone or listen to some music, or, I'm more anxious if my phone is in a different room. That's how they've grown up. So what do we need to think as kids get a little older?
So, and that's, all of these considerations are always developmental. Like certainly in middle school and maybe early high school, you really want to try to have those phones outside the room. And because the other thing about phones is they ding and they bing and they beep and they buzz and so what that does, if that is next to your bedside, that is disrupting your sleep, right? It's disrupting your sleep patterns. All of those sounds, and I know young people will say, oh, I don't hear it anymore, but your brain hears it. Your brain knows that what your ding is for a message, or what your what your buzz is for a certain, a certain app. Your brain knows those things, and it does affect your brain in terms of disrupting your sleep patterns. So as much as possible, having the phones outside the room. With older teens, it is a little bit harder, but making sure those phones are on silent, making sure that, they themselves are turning things down. It's one thing, to have it as they're listening to music or something off of their phone.
Oh, they'll say it's my
really
alarm clock. It's my alarm clock. I need it when I wake up. And of course, you could go get an old-fashioned alarm clock. But in my house, I'll just say I quit fighting that battle. It caused so much stress about removing it that they wanted to prove to me that they were responsible. That they said I shut it down through screen time on my Apple phone. So if you know how to do that, you can make the phones literally not work for a period of time. And so they argued that you can't use the phone, it's shut down anyway. And I guess my hope was that if someday they sleep on their own, they're teenagers now, if they go to college, that they'll remember to put their screen time on at night so nothing goes off. And I get that. I use my phone as an alarm too. It's just nothing dings while I'm sleeping. But I just want to bring that out there. If I could go back, I probably would have done that when they were younger, made sure they were always removed. But sometimes you've crossed a bridge, and the goal is you just want kids to sleep, right?
Right, right. Because let me just throw out a couple things for you here. The average high schooler sleeps 6.5 hours a night when they need 9. 1 in 5 teens gets less than 5 hours of sleep. My son had a couple friends in high school who would come home from sports practice at 5 o'clock, sleep from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, get up at 10 o'clock, be up until 1 or 2 in the morning, go back to sleep, and then get up again at 6. That kind of disrupted sleep is really, really poor quality sleep. And I understand it becomes adaptive, but that's poor quality sleep, and it just doesn't help you. It doesn't help you think clearly. It doesn't help your mood, and it doesn't help your energy.
Yeah, sleep's so important for all those things. So let's just go over the numbers again. Your teen or adolescent should be getting 9 hours of sleep.
9 hours of sleep. 9 hours, which is a lot of sleep, and that's a beautiful amount of sleep. But if you think about all the changes in their mind and their body that are going on in adolescence, all the growing that takes place, the learning, all the social emotional impact, middle school and high school is a really difficult time. So all the different things that are going, your brain needs the rest and the sleep in order to grow and develop. So the more sleep that you get them, the better. And there's all sorts of movements out there around, trying to move the early morning time of schools, but it's unfortunately not gone anywhere. But to start school later and to have more time to sleep would be honestly ideal.
Yeah. No, my son's high school actually did start doing classes at 8:45 last 2 years ago, and they said it was the greatest change they ever made because people are actually prepared to learn. And we can talk about needing some breakfast or a little bit afterward. But so when you're saying kids are getting 9 hours is what you want for a healthy brain, and what are teens getting?
Less than 6.5 hours.
The average teen in America.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right.
And we know there's always nights in college or maybe later on that you might stay up for a test because you just really need to study or something. But in general, every single night like that, doesn't that in part contribute to the mental health crisis we're seeing with young people?
Yeah, I mean, when you live with chronic sleep debt, it really negatively affects you. I mean, there's a whole body of research on individuals, adults that work third shift and how it shortens their life expectancy. It affects their health. It affects their immune system. It affects their mood. It affects their energy, right? That's third shift. But those teens that say, oh, I do better going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Actually, we are diurnal creatures. We need to be awake during the day and asleep at night when it's dark.
So other than convincing your teen, and I think if they've seen how tired they feel, they can understand that. But things that we can shift at home. Let's go back. routine so important? We know we're all busy. This has changed. You said that's part of the problem. Kids are sleeping less than they ever did, but we're also busier. We're not always home for dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock. But what would you advise? What do you advise your families when sleep is an issue and you just want to start getting them more? Like, what's a couple of things we can start today?
So it really is about the routine and having a plan for sleep, right? And I get it, right? There's an exception. They have a really big test, but honestly, how good is the quality of studying that happens at 1 or 2 in the morning? It's not good quality of studying. It's, because that means it's what we call state dependent. If your state is tiredness when you're learning the information, your state's probably going to be tiredness when you're trying to expunge the information. So it's really trying to create a routine and a schedule that disrupted sleep, like sleeping from 5 to 9, up from, eating dinner at 9, then up, from 9 until 2 in the morning, and then going back to sleep again. It is such poor quality sleep. So trying to fix some of the bigger problems, even adjusting your schedule by 15 to 30 minutes, even a little bit of extra sleep can really be very helpful.
Yeah. And I think hopefully kids will start to feel that. And so we might just need to back up everything and prioritize sleep, right? They're saying, oh, well, I got to do the dishes, or I got to go run this errand, or I got to do, whatever it is that maybe mom or dad's delaying it because they need to put the little ones. Bedtime really should be the priority, and we're all going to feel a lot better.
Right. And we are. I mean, I can remember when I had younger children, every single morning when I was exhausted waking up, I'd say to myself, okay, tonight I'm going to go to bed earlier. Right. And I wouldn't always do it, but I felt that exhaustion every day. Yeah. And the more, then when I could prioritize, just get to bed 15 to 30 minutes earlier, I would just feel better. So we're not talking about shifting someone by 2 hours. That's never going to happen, especially not for a teenager. But some of the little changes that we can make to prioritize something that helps us feel better about ourselves, helps our energy, helps our mood, helps our ability to pay attention. It just makes it better for all of us.
So we're going to shout it from the rooftops, 9 hours for a teen. And what about little ones? I mean, when we're talking about toddlers and whatnot, they might still do daytime naps. But I mean, I remember my kids were little, the goal was like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sometimes they needed a lot of sleep, half the day, right?
Right. Yeah, they can actually need a lot of sleep. Certainly even more than teenagers.
What about napping? What about when your teen comes home and wants to nap, or they want to sleep all day on a Saturday or a Sunday? How does that help with anything?
So let's define what a nap is, right? I think that the actual definition of a nap is like 45 minutes or less.
Okay.
A nap is not 3 hours. I call that a sleep, right? If you're napping from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock, that is not a nap. That is a sleep. Napping is like 45 minutes or less. So I'm not saying a nap is necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're exceedingly tired, but not letting yourself sleep for 3 hours, because then that'll affect your tiredness when you really do need to go to bed. Look, we all do it. I do it too, but there actually is no such thing as making up sleep. I do feel better psychologically if I know on a Saturday or Sunday I can sleep in a little bit. It does make me feel better. But if you get 9 hours of sleep on a Saturday or Sunday, but you're only getting 6 hours of sleep during the week, and you add up your sleep at the end of the week, it doesn't work like that. You might need 9 hours of sleep, because that's what we said sometimes you need, but it really is about shifting yourself and your schedule to prioritize sleep during the week, and not just thinking, okay, well, I'll sleep 12 hours on each day on the weekend and make up for it.
Yeah. So just even knowing that the goal, we don't want to make it impossible, but I love your idea of just move it back 15 minutes a night. That can be helpful. Yes, kids want to stay up later on the weekends and sleep in. You're okay with that, even though the research would say we do better when we go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time every day. Try to tell a teenager that. They're not going to want to do it.
Right. I like to be realistic, as you know. So, but not like wildly swinging it, right? And not swinging it by 3 hours, because that's a hard difference to make up during the week. That means you're making it up all week. And then right at the weekend again, you're swinging it again. So instead of going to bed at 10 o'clock, you're going to bed at 1 o'clock. That 3 hour swing is way too much for the body to handle.
Well, and the link between exercise and sleep, we know that kids are not as active. Now, some of you listening might be like, my kid's in sports, they're doing, they're running 5 days a week. Fine, that's great. But if they're not, and they're just on their devices after school, where we used to maybe go to the playground or ride our bikes for freedom, we're not seeing that as much. That's really going to affect your ability to sleep and your mood, right?
It affects everything, right? The lack of physical activity in young people really affects every aspect of their life. Because if you're not being physically active and you're not, getting outside and getting, sunlight and vitamin D, it's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your energy. It's going to affect the quality of your sleep. And then it comes full circle again, right? So now you're tired. Now you don't really want to go outside, right? So the things that used to be really typical when we were kids, which was you got home, you did your homework, and then you went outside for a couple of hours. Kids aren't doing that anymore. And if they are playing sports or doing activities, that's great. Trying to keep them as physically active as possible.
Yeah, and if they're not an athlete, even getting outside, taking a walk, maybe suggesting after dinner, a walk, a bike ride, I mean, all those things. I know it's hard when you have teens who just say, oh, I'm so tired. But that cycle of being tired and then not sleeping well will continue until we start to change some things.
Right. Absolutely.
In our final 2 minutes, as you are treating adolescents all the time at a premier institution like the Institute of Living, how big of a factor do you think is the lack of sleep, the sleep debt that you're seeing, and in the mental health crisis that we're experiencing?
I think it's huge. And I get it. Like, there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure on young people. There's pressure on parents to have, successful children, whatever that term might mean for any individual or any family, what successful means. There's a lot of pressure, but we have to just be careful to dial back what our expectations are, right? The expectation for physical activity doesn't mean you have to run 5 miles. It could mean that you walk around the block, or that you do something for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, something. So it's having some expectations, having some guidelines to go by, not, just having expectations that are over the top or not realistic, and really opening up the lines of communication. If you know that your child's struggling in some way, trying to assess what are the factors that are contributing to their struggling, and what can you do as a parent to help and support them.
And we'll leave it, it always starts with us. If we are anxious, not sleeping well, and then projecting that onto our kids, they are little energy containers, so they're going to feel it from us. So we need to also do good self-care for ourselves and be good role models. I'll leave it there because we've got about 20 seconds left. But you would agree, right, Doctor? Absolutely. Yes. Do as we do, and as we say. Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute. Yeah, need to be good role models. Thank you for being here for CURES Cures and letting us know so much about the importance of sleep. Thank you, Dr. Laura Saunders.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone, and be well. You can follow me at Cara Sundlin on social media and listen to this podcast on your favorite platform. Have a great day.